So after you recruit board members for your nonprofit organization, onboarding and training them is a critical next step to make sure they can be successful as members of the board of directors. But how do you onboard new board members to your nonprofit? That's what we're going to talk about in this video in 4 steps. Welcome back. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I'm a nonprofit founder and former executive director of the nonprofit that I started. I'm a social entrepreneur and, of course, social impact YouTuber. I hope that these videos are helpful as always, and don't forget to check out my 200 plus other videos in my video library all about these topics: nonprofits, social entrepreneurship, and more. I also have a website, foundertofulltime.com, where you can find more resources on starting a nonprofit, as well as a couple of courses just about that topic, and my newsletter linked below, where you can subscribe and get tips and resources and sometimes funding opportunities for your social impact projects. You did it! You successfully recruited some new board members for your nonprofit organization, but you don't just want to throw them into the fray right off the bat. You need a structured way of bringing them into the organization, giving them the information they need, and training them. Otherwise, you risk creating some disengaged board members right off the bat. And disengaged board members means board members who are not informed enough to make votes on important decisions for your organization. And it also means board members who are more hesitant to fundraise for your organization. So having well-trained and highly engaged board members is critically important. Let's talk through 4 steps to onboard your new board members so that we can prevent that disengagement from happening. Okay, let's get into a 4-step process to create an onboarding strategy for new board members that will keep them engaged and make them awesome ambassadors for your nonprofit mission. Step 1, of course, is to plan out the onboarding structure and timeline for your board members. Now, what I'm talking about is an actual written plan for how you're going to bring on your new board members once you've recruited them. And it's going to include 3 components. The first is the actual goals of the training, what you want them to leave the onboarding and training with, the knowledge that they should have. The second is the timeline. So what is the cadence or pace of that training and onboarding? And the third is, who are the key stakeholders? Who needs to be part of offering the training, teaching things to the board members, and what roles do they play in your organization already? So let's go back up to that first part, defining the objectives and goals of your onboarding program. This is going to be customized for your nonprofit, but I can give you some examples of what I would include if I were developing this plan for your or any nonprofit organization. And the first couple of things would be, they've got to have a clear understanding of the mission, the programs, and the values of your nonprofit. And if you don't already have your values reflected on and written somewhere, that is something you should go back and do before you develop the rest of this onboarding program. Because when people come together on a team and they can all agree in how they're going to behave and operate as part of the team through those values that everyone has agreed on, you're gonna have a lot more team cohesion and harmony as you work towards your mission. So I would start with the mission, the program, and the values, and then I would incorporate some learning about the organization's finances. So everything from what is your fiscal year, your budgeting year, the timeline for that, how much money you have in the bank right now, how much you are projected to have and spend, your top sources of revenue, etc. All of those basics like that are really important for board members to know. The third thing that I would include is knowledge on where to find key documents that board members might need to reference and have access to throughout their board service. So we're talking about things like the organization's bylaws, conflict of interest policies, your annual budget, stuff like that. So where can they find it? Is it going to be handed to them in paper form? Is it going to be somewhere online and they get a link to it? Thinking through the logistics of that is important too. A couple of other things that might be goals of your onboarding process. You might want to make sure that your board members know who in the organization to contact if they have questions about certain things or problems with certain things. So providing something like an organizational chart or contact list with job titles could be a really helpful tool for them as well as part of this onboarding package and training. Another thing is you want your new board members to really have a sense of being included and welcomed into the organization. This is less something that you train on, of course, and more of a feeling or experience that you'll aim to capture throughout the whole of the onboarding and training experience. Everyone wants to feel like they're part of a team, and of course, you're going to be more motivated if you feel like you're part of the team and its mission as well. And you also want to make sure, as part of the training, that not only do board members know the mission and the values and the vision and the programs, but you also want them to feel confident explaining that mission to others. In other words, you want them to be able to give an elevator pitch. So in my opinion, I would definitely incorporate some training on how to give an elevator pitch for the organization as part of your board training. So, like I said, you want to write out your goals and the topics you think are important to cover as part of your onboarding plan, and feel free to use some of the ones that I listed as examples. But the idea here is that you're going to be creating training programming or presentations, depending on the format that's going to work best for your team, and only you know that. You're going to create something like that for each of the topics you want to cover within the board training. The next step of this plan that you're creating is the timeline. So when is all of this going to happen? And you probably want to plan it out from the time that you've confirmed that you are accepting a board candidate onto your board. So the moment you send them the confirmation and congratulations that they've been elected onto your board of directors, what happens after that? Things on the timeline you want to think through might include: what is the date they have their first board meeting officially? What is the date they receive their board welcome packet, which might include some of the materials we talked about just moments ago? What are the different dates of the onboarding and training sessions if you're going to spread them out? What does that look like? Is there a particular deadline for when they need to review and sign paperwork? For example, they should probably be signing off on the conflict of interest, acknowledging that they have read it and understand it as board members. So when are the deadlines for all of these things? You're going to map this out in your written plan as a timeline. And the third part of this that I talked about is identifying your stakeholders, your leaders who are going to be involved in this board onboarding process at some point. This is usually your top staff leadership. So if you have an executive director, obviously the officers of your board. So if you have board chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, those positions probably involved. You might have had a nominating committee on the board or a special committee on the board designated to board onboarding. So those people would obviously need to be involved as well. But you just want to write out in list format who all these people are, and then think through what are they going to be responsible for doing? What meetings do they need to be present at? My advice is to always invite your staff and board to collaborate together, to be part of board meetings together. I find that that creates a more cohesive team structure rather than keeping the board and staff too separate. We're all on the same team, so collaborating and talking openly about the goals and the needs of the organization can really create some strength there. And then just a pro tip, once you have dates on your timeline figured out, I recommend you get them on the calendars of all the people who need to attend, from the staff and board who are participating in leading the trainings and onboarding process to the new board members who are taking the training and onboarding process. Get it on calendars early, because sometimes people like to plan ahead and you need to make sure that they can be present. Okay, so now you know the goals of your onboarding process. You have a basic timeline, you know who needs to be involved. It's time for step 2, which is to create your onboarding materials. And this can be broken down into 2 parts. The first is your welcome packet, so something the board members receive the moment they become board members. And the second thing is all of the rest of the training materials that might be required for teaching new board members on all the topics that we talked about. Let's go back and talk about that welcome packet for a moment. What should be included in this welcome packet? So I recommend at minimum that you're including some of your key documents in there, maybe a one-pager outlining the mission, vision, top programs, and maybe key talking points about the organization so that they can use that later for their elevator pitch practice. You're also talking about including an outline for the rest of the training. What can they expect to be learning and when? So this might be a timeline of the next 6+ months, depending on how far you've stretched out your training process. The third thing that you might want to include is a personalized welcome letter from your executive director and your board chair. That's just one of those little touches to help people feel welcome, of course, and congratulating them once more for joining the board. And then that contact list. We talked earlier about an org chart or something that shows them how they can get in touch with other people in the organization and who's responsible for what. A contact list here also adds to that feeling of being included because it gives them access to others in the organization if they have questions. For creating the training materials, this largely depends on the topics that you finalized in the goals that we talked about in step 1. So remember, some of those examples were making sure they understand the organization's finances, the mission statement, etc. In terms of how you structure these trainings, you can really do it any way that you want, as long as the outcome, which is people know and understand the information and they feel engaged with it, is the result. So it's up to you to think through what the best format is going to be. You know your people best, but some example formats might include integrating it as a portion of a regularly standing board meeting. It could be having a separate training session outside of a board meeting. It could be a 1 or 2 day, long day, like mini summit conference situation where they come and they learn all the training at once or over the course of a couple of weekends. Some people might like that, some people might not like that. You might have a combination of some online learning, so asking them to watch some videos, review some documents, and in-person discussions to make sure that they have absorbed the information. So there are lots of possibilities. You just need to think about what you think is going to resonate best with your particular board and staff. And of course, making sure that the person on your team, whether it's staff or board, who needs to be a part of teaching that material is available and is part of the process of creating that material, of course. Step 3 is to hold your orientation and training sessions on the timeline that you figured out. So this is going to look like a couple of different things. There's going to be an initial orientation or some kind of meeting that's probably the kickoff to everything, where you're going to be introducing some of the stuff. Then the training roll out in the ways that we discussed before. You need to kind of think through what is the best format that's going to work for your organization and structure it that way. And then you really want to make sure that you have built in some time to check in with the board members throughout this onboarding as well. Let's talk about that first orientation or kickoff meeting. This is a great opportunity to include all of your board and all of your staff and maybe even some of your top volunteers all in the same room together, because it creates that welcoming environment that we talked about. It helps people put faces to names on that contact list that they hopefully received. And at this meeting, it's a great opportunity to cover the basics. So mission, history of the organization, vision, goals, top programs, etc. You don't want to get too far into the weeds of something like your bylaws or finances here, because you need to kick them off in a way that is starting with the mission, which is the whole reason they joined the board in the first place. It's also a good idea to include some kind of team building exercise in this initial meeting, again, to just build on the rapport of everyone working together. After that initial kickoff, it's time for the rest of your training program that you developed in your outline before. Like I said, you can think through the various formats if you want to integrate it into existing board meeting schedule, if it needs to be a separate thing. But whatever you do in terms of the scheduling of it, I do recommend that you try a different sort of set of activities and ways of presenting the information in different portions of this training. You want to keep it interactive, engaging. I would avoid just lecture-based presentations. You want to incorporate things like discussions and maybe even some games and team building exercises throughout, case studies, maybe some reading and some video. Like really mix it up, because you really don't know what the learning style is for each of your board members. So if you try some different things, you'll at least be more likely to capture the attention of and engage the majority of them. I mentioned earlier that another part of this was creating those processes for check-ins with the new board members. This is really important also to meet that goal of creating a sense of belonging and being included in the organization. So you might want to set up a schedule of check-ins every couple of months, especially with your new board members. This is where you're collecting their feedback. This is where you are making sure that they have been introduced to all of the members of the team, if they haven't met everyone yet. So putting those timelines for the check-ins on your calendar too is another important step of this. All right, step 4 is to simply collect feedback and continuously iterate to make this board training and onboarding the best it can be for your future board members. A couple of things you might want to consider doing. After the training is complete for your new board members, you might want to have someone like your board chair reach out to those new board members to just collect basic feedback on the training. What was the most interesting? What was the hardest to understand? What might they like additional training on? Was it engaging? Any advice for making it better, etc. Another thing you might try is assigning a board mentor or board buddy. This is something that some nonprofit boards try, where they assign someone who's been on the board a little bit longer to one of the new board members, and the job of that mentoring board member is to kind of show them the ropes, right? To make sure that they're connected, they're plugged in. It gives them someone personally that they can talk to if they have questions, and can really add to that sense of feeling included. So on an ongoing basis, maybe every couple of months, a few times per year, you want to just be making sure that you're offering more opportunities for learning, answering top questions that board members have that maybe haven't been answered adequately in the training, just continuous learning as an organization. Once a year, you might also consider having a board evaluation survey where the board members can judge themselves on how engaged and knowledgeable they feel. This can really help you pinpoint any specific challenges or topics that are harder to understand for board members, and help you improve the training in the future. And the last thing that I want to say here is board training is hard. Sometimes it can be a long process, so it's important to celebrate achievements as you go. Maybe, I don't know, you could come up with some fun way of acknowledging when someone graduates from the training, or I don't know, give some kind of gamified like badge or something when they complete each training session. Just keeping it fun, keeping it celebratory can really help people stay motivated throughout that training process. So I'm kind of curious what you think about this. Have you served on a nonprofit board? And what would you say about your experience with onboarding and training? Was it really good? Was there something that you've experienced that you thought would be a really good suggestion for other nonprofits to try? Share in the comments below. We'd love to spread the word about some good ideas in this changemaker community. All right, like I said before, if you are in the process of starting a nonprofit or developing a sustainable fundraising strategy, those are the 2 courses I have on my website, Founder to Full-Time, in addition to some blogs and other resources there. I have my newsletter that is linked below, where I send tips, strategies, resources, funding opportunities. Subscribe, and of course you can opt out anytime it's not bringing value to you. And then finally, I have my group on Facebook, Change the World or Bust. We have 6,000 people in there from around the world who are all making an impact in their own way, and I know we'd love to have you there too. So come out and join us, and that's all I have for you this time. See you later. Bye.